Hey everyone, in this video we're going to take a look at chapter 12 from book 3 of Eutropius and continue looking at his version of Hannibal and the Second Punic War. So if you think about where we left off, we were talking about how there was just a major defeat at the Battle of Cannae. Hannibal has used this to get a bunch of cities of Italy to desert and defect over to his side. And in response, the Romans have sent, well, they haven't sent, they had already previously sent, but Eutropius is telling you about their force sent to Spain under the Scipios and the success they were having against Hannibal's brother Hasdrubal. So again, we said the last chapter really is the turning point of his narrative where everything seems really, really dark and bleak, particularly after the Battle of Cannae. And now it's going to turn around, and that kind of emphasizes his theme of the Romans being able to overcome any obstacle, no matter how bleak it might look. So that's where the story picks up right now. So you have Anno Quarto, postquam ad Italiam Hannibal venit, Marcus Claudius Marcellus consul apud Nolam civitatem Campaniae contra Hannibalem bene pugnavit. So the Anno Quarto is just an ablative of time when. So you want to say in the fourth year, right? Quarto meaning fourth. So the fourth year after Hannibal came, venit, to Italy, ad Italiam, right? Marcus Claudius Marcellus, the consul, right? He's described as consul. So they've sent a consular army again, right? The Roman Republic is kind of rebooting their forces. So the consul, and you have to go to the very end, pugnavit bene, fought well, right? Apud Nolam, near Nola, which is described as a civitatem Campaniae, a city of Campania, right? Campania is that southern section of southern Italy, right? Nola is down in that direction. So he fought well contra Hannibalem, against Hannibal. So in the fourth year after Hannibal has come to Italy and been wreaking havoc, they get a little bit of a victory, right? So they fight well, right? And the idea here is the bene pugnavit is showing you that things are starting to turn around a little bit. Then we continue, and you have Hannibal, multas civitates Romanorum per Apuliam Calabriam Britios occupavit. So Hannibal, right, he occupavit at the very end. He occupied, meaning he kind of took over, multas civitates, so many cities, Romanorum, of the Romans, so many Roman cities, you might say, throughout per Apuliam, which is Apulia, Calabriam, which is Calabria, and Britios, which is a region called Bruttium, right, in that southern area. So it's showing you the different regions of Italy, particularly in the south, where Hannibal is responding by taking these cities over. So the idea here is after Cannae, right, Hannibal is starting to get city-states to defect, and this is really his strategy. Instead of attacking Rome, which is a great question that I would encourage you to look into, right, why didn't Hannibal attack the city of Rome? He decides that if he can establish a power base in southern Italy and get a lot of these cities to switch sides, he can get fresh troops, he can get more supplies, things like that, which he desperately needs, right? Remember, the Carthaginians had sent their reinforcements to Spain at the moment because of the loss of Hasdrubal, not that he died, but his losses in battle, right? So they haven't been sending anything to Hannibal. So as a result, Hannibal really is taking over that region of southern Italy, right? With those strong Greek ties. That's the region he's in. And it ties into this next sort of section here. So you have quo tempore etiam rex Macedoniae Philippus ad eam legatos misit promitens auxilia contra Romanos sub hac condicione ut deletis Romanis ipse quoque contra Graecos ab Hannibale auxilia acciperet. That is a long sentence, but if you follow it one piece at a time, you'll get what's going on here. So remember I said Hannibal is in southern Italy, and it has a distinctly Greek flair to it, right? This is what we sometimes call Magna Graecia, Greater Greece. So a lot of these cities really had Greek ties to them. So at this time, quo tempore, right? It's just an ablative of time when. You can translate it at this time. The king of Macedon, right? Also, you might say the king of Macedon, the Rex Macedoniae, was Philip, right? Philippus. So Philip is the king of Macedon. Macedon is north of Greece. It is sort of, today looking at it, you'd say, maybe you think of it as Greek, but it really is a distinct culture. This is where Alexander the Great came from, right? So it's definitely that northern region. It's not necessarily the same culture as what we think of as Greece today with, like ancient Greece, like Athens and Sparta. It's a little different from that, right? But this king, Philip, misit, he sent to him, ad eam, meaning to Hannibal, legatos, he sent envoys, diplomats, right? He was promethenes. So promethenes is a present participle. It's describing Philippus, right? So he sent envoys promising, right, auxilia, help. Contra Romanos means against the Romans. So he was promising help against the Romans, but it's sub hoc conditione, under this condition. And you're about to have an indirect command because there's a condition involved, right? So the ut clause is setting off that indirect command. And it has, before you even get to the verb, you have this ablative absolute of deletis Romanis. So sort of you can think of it as with the Romans, or when the Romans are destroyed, right? With the Romans defeated, deletis Romanis. So when that happens, ipse, he himself, meaning Philip, he too, quoque, acciperet, he might receive, you could translate that. It's imperfect subjunctive. That's where your ut clause is kind of finished. So ut acciperet. So when the Romans are gone, right, is really what he's getting at, with the Romans having been defeated, that he himself, right, he might receive auxilia, help, ab Hannibale, from Hannibal. Right, that ablative of agent. Who's he going to receive help from? From Hannibal, contra Graecos, against the Greeks. So he's offering them help, right? But he says, look, if I help you against the Romans, here's the condition. Once we defeat the Romans, deletis Romanis, right? After we've done that, you, Hannibal, are going to bring your Carthaginians and you're going to help me against the Greeks. So again, this is why you don't want to think of Macedonians as being Greek. I know in sort of modern times you might think that. What he's talking about is going south, right? Going back to where Alexander the Great had once gone and kind of, taking sovereignty, you might say, or subjugating the city-states of Greece, places like Athens, Thebes, Sparta, Corinth, right? That southern area, that's who he wants help with, so he can expand his Macedonian empire. So what we're referring to here, or what we're kicking off, is the First Macedonian War, right? Again, this is from the Roman point of view, so their first war against Macedon. So if you're looking at this chart, this is, I think, just right off Wikipedia, but it's showing you the First Macedonian War is going on during the Second Punic War, right? So at this time, the Romans are really the area in blue here. So you're looking at Italy, Sicily, Corsica, and Sardinia, the islands to the west, right? The Carthaginians are in red, so they have basically North Africa near Carthage, right, and parts of Spain. So if you're thinking about it, we often think of the Second Punic War as just involving these places. It doesn't. So at this time, Hannibal is in southern Italy, making a sort of Carthaginian foothold there. And the Romans have gone to Iberia, right? They've gone to Hispania, and they're fighting Hasdrubal, right, in Spain. So the wild card here is what's going on to the east. So the Carthaginians and I guess the Macedonians too, they very rightly surmise that, hey, Rome might be in trouble here. And if Rome is in trouble, Rome is sort of the buffer in between Macedon, which is in purple, right? That's sort of north of Greece, our area, right? They're like, Rome is the buffer. We don't really like the Romans. You don't really like the Romans. The enemy of my enemy is my friend, right? It's kind of the logic. So the Carthaginians are thinking this could work out really well. If we introduce another front to the battle, right? We have Italy, we have Spain. If we open up a third front with the Macedonians, we're going to stretch the Romans out and we can take advantage of it. Right? So the Macedonians are looking at it and saying, hey, we don't really want anything in Italy necessarily. We're focused on Greece, right? Which would be sort of that area in sort of greenish, if you're looking at this map, right? That southern part of Greece. They're like, we need help. If we can get, help the Carthaginians, they'll help us. That's the logic here. And the idea for the Carthaginians is let's stretch out the Romans and force them to be in too many places at once. So the threat here is if this drags out the Macedonian War, the Romans are in real trouble. They have Hannibal in southern Italy. How are they going to fight Macedon to the east? They have Carthage to the south. They have Spain to the west. They're all over the place, right? And that's kind of the idea of what the Carthaginians are doing here. And it's mutually beneficial for the Carthaginians and the Macedonians, right? So that's why this happens. And kind of seeing it on a map will let you understand what's going on here and why this happens. But there is a problem, which is what Eutropius is going to show you right here. You have Captis igitor legatis Philippi et re cognita Romani in Macedoniam Marcum Valerium Laevinum ire userunt in Sardiniam Tullium, right, T Manlium Torquatum Proconsulem. So the problem is the Romans figured this out. So you have an ablative absolute of Captis legatis. So with the envoys, right, however, right, therefore, but with the envoys having been captured, right, so Captis legatis, the envoys get interrupted, right, the legatis Philippi, the envoys of Philip. right? So having captured or intercepted these messengers of Philip and re cognita, kind of, you could say, like having with the thing, the re, the plan is really what it is, having been known. So in other words, they figured out the plan that the Carthaginians are about to side with the Macedonians. Both of these ablative absolutes are setting up things that already happened before the main event, right? So first, right, they figured out, they captured the envoys of Philip, and by the way, they figured out this master plan of the alliance. Then the Romani, there's your subject, the Romans, they userunt ire, they ordered, right, someone to go, ire. Who did they order? They ordered Marcus Valerius Laevinus, right? So they ordered him to go, ire, in Macedonia, into Macedon, right, into Macedonia. They have to go and attack the Macedonians. They send Marcus Valerius Laevinus to Macedon. And at the same time, they also send Titus Manlius Torquatus, the proconsul, right, meaning someone who had been a consul before. They send him to Sardinia. Okay, so they have two kind of reactions here. So first, they need to stomp out the Macedonians, right, this threat. So they do send an army in that direction. And then they send someone to Sardinia. And if you're wondering why, right, Sardinia is to the west, like what does this have to do with anything? Eutropius is about to explain it to you. He says, Nam etiam ea, ea solicitata ab Hannibale Romanos deseruerat. Deseruerat. There we go. Right? So because, meaning why did they send him to Sardinia? Even this one, this ea means like Sardinia, right? Having been stirred up, solicitata, right? There's your perfect passive participle. Having been stirred up by Hannibal, and not necessarily by Hannibal directly, but probably like messengers from Hannibal and the events watching Hannibal take over Italy. So having been stirred up or urged on by this, right? The island of Sardinia, right? Ea, this one, Sardinia, deseruerat, it deserted the Romanos, it deserted the Romans. So now Sardinia goes into the fold of leaving the Romans, okay? So if you think about it on this point, now the Romans have a lot of fronts to contend with. They have Spain, they have Hannibal in Italy, they have Macedon to the east, and now they have Sardinia, right, the island to the west, which is really close to Rome, right? Has switched sides and deserted them. So they have a lot of problems to put down all at once, and they respond by sending a bunch of generals and armies into a bunch of different places. So it might seem kind of bleak, like how are they going to pull this off? But you're going to see they're going to do very well in these fronts, in all these places, and it's going to kind of turn the tide of the war. So hopefully this makes some sense and you're feeling pretty good about your translation. This section doesn't have anything too crazy in terms of the grammar. There's a couple subjunctives mixed in there. You have some ablative absolutes, but otherwise it's really more getting the history of what's happening here. And again, I'd encourage you to go back and dive more yourself into things like the First Macedonian War, or if you're following along the history of the Second Punic War, look at what happened right in Sardinia and who these people are. It'll give you a nice picture of what's going on because, again, Eutropius is really simplifying some pretty major events to serve his narrative, right? He's just giving you the brief history. If you have any questions at all, put them in the comments below. I'm happy to help. But otherwise, just keep practicing this, keep reading through it, and hopefully it'll get easier as you go. Good luck.